Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Surah Al-Baqarah chapter 2 verse 30th, and this is part 2 of verse 30th. If we remember that in our previous presentation we went over the evolution of human physical side and how the tree of evolution progressed from single cell. And today we will go to the next part, which is about the human self. The story of man expanding the concept of the human self. These are the references in this, the human self and Iblis, and the meanings of the Quran. These two cover this aspect quite well. And the excerpts are taken from this volume 2, the meanings of the Quran. And this is our contact. The first slide is the creation of Adam, that is mankind, with choice and intent. And we should keep in mind that Quran is dealing with the story, with the account of man himself, who possesses choice and intent. Malaika point to the unbridled outlook of Adam. That is, Malaika think that Adam will act in a certain way and may not use the other side of the choice because Malaika are not aware of that other choice which the Quran is going to discuss subsequently. And Quran says in this verse, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون. I've highlighted some aspects which we will be discussing in our next presentation, hopefully. But over here, Rabbuka lil malaikate, Rabubiyat has appeared over here. And then the universal forces. Khalifa means that is, Adam is the successor of the previous creation on the earth. And then Malaika say that he is going to create fasad and shed blood. And Allah in return says that I know what you do not know. That is, the universal forces, since they don't have choice and intent, so they do not know about the plan or the program of Allah at this stage. When life, traversing its evolutionary stages, reached the human form, and according to the program of Mashiach, which is the program of Allah, that moment arrived that man inhabits the earth in place of the former habitations. The universal forces, that is Malaika, were astonished because before this there was no such creation in the universe which could dare to go against the laws of Allah. But this latest creation was being made the possessor of choice and intent, which meant that he, that is man, could also disobey the laws of Allah. Because choice and intent has been given to man, and man has those desires as well. So he wants to follow his own desires. Hence, they, the Malaika, respectfully submitted that, "O Allah, what kind of creation is this, which is being settled on earth?" And we should keep in mind this is a metaphorical explanation account of the arrival of Adam on the planet Earth. He will rebel against your law, whose consequence will be inequities and bloodshed. So the question can arise over here, how did Malaika know about it? And hopefully we will discuss it in our subsequent presentations. Contrary to this, we are those who, whatever duties are assigned to us, always remain busy in the accomplishment of these, and we go to whatever extent is required in order to make your programs the cause for praise, admiration, and glorification. So essentially, Quran is explaining the side of Malaika, how the universal forces are looking at the planet Earth and how Adam is going to behave. At this, the creator of the universe, that is Allah, declared that you cannot understand this latest program of ours. We know all this. So that means that up to that point on the planet Earth, there was no creation which possessed choice and intent. Evolution was taking place, animals were coming to existence, but once man came into being, that is Adam, then of course the whole situation changed. Now let us go to the first slide of today's presentation. We need to focus on our I as human beings. These philosophers have reached this conclusion by themselves in a peculiar way that other than the physical body, there is something else within man. If we remember, There was a lot of some discussion included in our previous presentation where some quotes were shared from the West. Over here, it is continuation of the same. They declare that the human body is an amalgamation of various cells. The state of these cells is such that a large majority of them keep dying and in their place new cells keep taking birth. That is, our body is continuously transforming. The previous cells die and in their place new cells emerge. Though we are not aware of it, but we can see that, for example, as we age, our body is changing. That means our cells are changing. This process of elimination and replacement continues until, after a while, the previous body is completely replaced by a new body. If man was merely defined by his physical body, then after a period of time, nothing would have remained of this former human being, but experience refutes this. So if we think that we are only the physical beings, that means after transformation of our body, that is replacement of previous cells with the new cells, we should also change. But that is not the case, and that is not what we experience. Whatever you had said 20 or 30 years ago, or whatever task you had performed, even today you will say about it that this is what I did, or I had said such and such. For example, 4 years ago, if we attended some presentation over here, then we are exactly the same human being after 4 years. That which you call I neither ends nor alters with the changing of the physical body. This remains exactly the same, and this is that very I due to which man is in reality deserving of being called a human being. At this juncture, one great reality expressed by the Quran appears before us. And there is a verse from Surah Al-Sajda. One part of this will be noted initially. In this, first of all, those stages of human creation are mentioned in which both man and animals are included. We covered part of this in our previous presentation. The pronoun used for man in these is the third person. And Quran has used the words naslahu, that is related to progeny, race, sawwahu, that human beings have been given a certain potential, certain balances within their personality, fihe, that is within him. After this, it is declared that Allah breathed his ruh into him, that is fihe. And in this way, Allah bestowed hearing, sight, and heart on you, and that is kum. So after the physical side of man, then the Quran is addressing us as you, that is, we have an I. And we experience in our life as well. For example, when we are addressing our children, we talk to them as human beings, as someone who is responsible enough to take responsibility. And this is our daily phenomena in our interaction with others. We go to a supermarket and buy certain thing, then somebody at the till is going to do some work for us. And that is us and them. That kind of a relationship is only between human beings. The next slide is I provides that changelessness in an ever-changing world. And this is something we should notice ourselves as well if we haven't done it before. Here, in place of the third person, the addressee kum is in the second person, i.e. you. In other words, the consequence of this breathing of divine ruh is that man became worthy of being addressed directly, i.e. this creation now became deserving of being called a human being, and this you is that which does not keep changing with the human body, which changes every moment. And this is a very important point which we can only learn from the Quran, that how did we get that I? How come we are now being addressed as you? It is because of that divine energy. When you say to someone that 10 years ago you said this means that even today you are the same person you were 10 years ago. Even Western thinkers are acknowledging that within the body of man, which changes every moment, there is also some such entity which is unfamiliar with alteration, which does not change, which is established within itself. This is called the human nafs or self. Not only is there no effect on this I, with the change at every moment in the human body, even when death descends on the human body, its I is still not affected by this. So understanding this I of ours, that is each one of us, is extremely important, because This understanding is the one on which we will change the outlook of our life, our actions in life, and we will try to strengthen it. Because once we recognize it and we know the state of development of this I using the Quran, then we can strengthen it. There is an external criterion provided by the Quran. Otherwise, everyone says, I am right, because there is an egoistic proclivities within man. It continues to remain the same and unaltered, and disrobing the human body, it moves forward. It is this fundamental characteristic of the human self about which the renowned French philosopher Bergson says, we change without ceasing, meaning that change does take place within us, but we never vanish. And that sense of identity, we can recognize it that it is not changing as we are living our life, but we know our consciousness is changing. Our experiences, our learning, our interaction with others, because of that, our vision is changing. And in agreement with Bergson, Nikolai Bardev, a Russian philosopher, states personality is changelessness in change, i.e., the human self is the name for changelessness among a throng of changes. The next slide is recognizing the presence of I. Very important. Professor Erwin Schrödinger has written a short but very important book called What is Life? He writes at the end of this book, if you analyze I, then you will see that it is more than merely the name of the human experiences and memory. This is that screen on which gather the imprints of the human memory and experience. While going through these excerpts, we should keep in mind that these Western thinkers were not exposed to the teaching of the Quran, and still they were able to at least recognize their own I and the issues around that I, that is, their own consciousness. This is that screen on which gather the imprints of the human memory and experience. If you study closely your inner world, then this reality will become manifested on you, that what you call I, it is the name of that foundation on which rises the structure of experience and memory. If some hypnotist does this, that he totally erases all your previous memory, even then you will see that this I of yours will not die. Hence, the existence of the human self can never be wasted. This philosopher has noted a certain point here which we do not wish to move on from without elucidating. Those who deny the existence of the human self, that is the materialistic outlook, say that that which you call I, and present this reason as evidence for it, that what I had said 10 years previously, even today I am conscious of it and acknowledge that it was I that said it. If through the body changing nothing remained behind, then how could I have had any awareness of it? It is clear from this that there is something within man which is not influenced by the changes in the body, and this is what is known as the human self. The next slide is the human self is independent of our memory, and this is something very important to understand. They, that is the materialistic outlook, people with that say that this is the human memory due to which this kind of awareness endures. An individual whose memory is impaired or lost remembers nothing about himself, nor does he have any awareness of the events of his past. And memory is the function of the neurons of the brain, i.e., this is the activity of the physical system of the body, and since the neurons of the brain end with death, hence after death nothing remains of man. Here, Professor Schrödinger has given a response to this objection of theirs. He states that the imprints of human needs and intentions are stamped on the human self, which is unfamiliar with change. Memory is that means through which these imprints manifest in a tangible form before us. Let us understand this subtle point through an example. A program is being broadcast from a radio station which you are listening to on your radio set. When suddenly this voice stops emitting from this, you assume that the radio program has ended. But after investigating, it is learned that in fact a wire in your radio set had become faulty. It is obvious that the cessation of sound from the radio set does not mean that the radio station has ended. It still exists, but a fault transpired in the means, that is your radio set, through which to receive its programs. Memory is that radio set through which the programs to be transmitted by yourself appear in front. So memory is a tool with I. So I is independent of the memory. It is using memory to get things done. And if there is no memory, whatever that I has become, it will still remain the same. Due to an impairment in memory, the radio set, it will not be correct to draw this conclusion that there is simply no radio station behind it or that it has been wiped out. Hence, if events of the past cannot be remembered due to the damage or loss of someone's memory, this will not mean that these events were imprinted on the memory and that due to its being damaged or lost, the imprints themselves have gone to waste. Those effects were stamped on the human self and remain established in their place despite the impairment of the memory. I once talked to a doctor who worked with the nursing homes, and he said that you can very easily differentiate the existence of different selves between two human beings who have lost their memory. And the one who had a fairly difficult life, his reaction will be quite different from the one who had a fairly stable and happier life. Because I does not lose its own existence, and memory just helps us to recall some of our past events, so that we have to differentiate between the two. The next slide is expanding this further. Bergson goes even further in this matter. In his renowned book, Matter and Memory, after a discussion at a highly philosophical level, he presents this conclusion that in reality, memory is not an action of the mind. It is merely the means of expression of a non-material active element. In his words, you will have now understood why memory cannot be an act of the mind. The mind maintains the continuity of memory, and by encompassing it in a material mold makes it capable of being applied in the present. But pure memory is not a material entity, it is a manifestation of the spiritual self, that is non-matter element. The word of memory is in reality the word of the soul. So soul over here we should take it as human self. It is clear from the research of these philosophers that human consciousness or memory, which is another name for the continuity of consciousness, is not the outcome of the physical system of the body of man. This is the manifestation of the human self, which is unfamiliar with change. So the I is not changing, but brain is aging and memory is related to brain's capacity to remember certain things, and which remains unfamiliar with change even after a period of time. And even all the events which are recorded in our memory, it is I which is providing some kind of interpretation of those. The Quran has described this profound reality in a very eloquent style. In Surah Al-Zumar, it is stated, Allah brings the human self, which is the fountainhead of consciousness, under His control in the state of sleep and the state of death. For example, during our sleep, our memory disappears. We go into that, brain is into a rest mode, whereas our consciousness, that is, which contains I, is suspended. I.e., the performance of the human self, consciousness and choice and intent is suspended temporarily. After sleep, when man awakens, then his consciousness returns for a period of time. But in the case of death, it does not return to the human body, it is held back. There are great signs hidden in this to reach a supreme reality for those people who use their intellect and reasoning. This verse, we should go through it and the verse before and after a number of times and then pause and reflect, and there is a lot into it for us to reflect. The next slide is human body is the medium through which the self finds expression, and that is an important point to understand. And particularly, even if we have understood, we have to explain it to others. For example, within a family setup, we should explain it to our children so that they understand these fundamentals, basics, right at the beginning of their life in this world. In the same way that the human self does not become annihilated with sleep, it does not mean that due to loss or impairment of memory, the human self has become annihilated, or that it is nothing other than memory. Human consciousness does not remain functioning during the state of sleep, even though his body still continues to function. Also, after death, the presence or absence of the human body has no effect on the self. It still remains intact together with its imprints but does not return to the body. We cannot say what types of mediums will be conferred after death for the expression of the imprints of the human self. And we should not worry about it as well. We can, of course, relate it to our body, and in fact, we should have some kind of a glad tiding that if we have acquired a developed self, then that medium of expression will be far better than the one we now have. But whatever the mediums are, it is a fact that the imprints of the human self are indestructible. This is that reality which these Western philosophers have described each in their own style. One quote from Erich Fromm in his book Man for Himself. If we get a chance to go through this book, it is quite a good book, and I think it is available on Google in PDF format. In the same sense, we have faith in ourselves. We are aware of the existence of a self, of a core in our personality which is unchangeable and which persists throughout our life in spite of varying circumstances and regardless of certain changes in opinions and feelings. It is this core which is the reality behind the word I, and on which our conviction of our own identity is based. Very important paragraph, that we know that we exist and our sense of identity is known to us. That is, I is aware of its own existence in the world. Unless we have faith in the persistence of ourself, our feeling of identity is threatened and we become dependent on other people whose approval then becomes the basis for our feeling of identity with ourselves. And this is very important as part of this paragraph, that if we don't have our own strong sense of identity, our own convictions, our own clear aim in life, then we become dependent on the opinions of others. Then others are the ones who will be creating ourselves. And this is the state in which we are existing in the world of 2025. Only the person who has faith in himself is able to be faithful to others, because only he can be sure that he will be the same at a future time as he is today, and therefore to feel and to act as he now expects to. And faith over here, we can turn it into conviction, that if I'm fully convinced of my own existence, my own changelessness within my own I, and it is based on the permanent values of the Quran, then nothing in the world can waver my resolve on this path of Allah. Faith in oneself is a condition of our ability to promise something, and since, as Nietzsche pointed out, man can be defined by his capacity to promise, that is one of the conditions of human existence, that we should be able to commit to our own path and also commit to others as we live this life, of course, depending on the values. So it is important. These people went into the human psyche in a great detail and the finer aspects of it by observing people around them. So we cannot say that these opinions do not matter. These opinions, they acquired based on evidence around them. To be able to make firm commitments in life, a very important aspect of human existence. Erich Fromm has said that the consequence of the human self being unfamiliar with change is that man is held responsible and obligated to account for his previous decisions. So accountability is extremely important, and to become and holding oneself accountable is part of strengthening ourselves. In this regard, Rasool writes in his book Theory of Good and Evil that the whole basis of the moral system rests on this fact that I am responsible for all my past decisions and contracts. That is why Quran puts so much emphasis on fulfilling our promises, fulfilling our agreements. Because if we cannot, then our I is not firm, is not strengthened. It is not making full commitments. It's not holding itself accountable for its own agreements and commitments. Hence, if after some time the I does not remain what it was previously, then in this situation I simply cannot be declared to be responsible for my former decisions and contracts. Because life is all about making right commitments and then fulfilling those commitments. It is not that all the time we are thinking, if I made a commitment, how to get out of it. If we have made a commitment, then we must fulfill it because that manifests the strength of our character, strength of our I. And that is why Quran has repeatedly emphasized on living up to our commitments in life. And the biggest commitment is where we hand over our life and possessions to Allah's cause. If this is the situation, then no acquisition can be levied on any person for the infringement of a contract. And this is what is happening in the world of today, that these countries which are in position of power are not fulfilling their side of the commitments. And this is that foundation on which the whole structure of the law of requital is raised, whose lengthy process continues beyond death. So whatever is happening in the world, we should try to analyze it in the light of the Quran. And that means we should know the permanent values which are applicable to the situation so that our self becomes aware of the problems in the world, and then we strengthen ourselves in our own field of operation wherever we are. Regarding the human self, we have seen that the Quran has explained it in these words. Allah breathed into him his ruh. And this is something which non-Quranic people simply cannot understand. Wherever there is a self, its fundamental characteristic is that it is an indivisible unity. It simply cannot be divided into parts. If some part of a self becomes separated from it, then that self becomes incomplete or flawed. And an incomplete self simply cannot be called a self. In the English language, the word individuality is used for the unity of the self. The meaning of individual is indivisible, i.e. incapable of being divided. So the issue is that we should know it and then remain united. Our integrity should remain intact within us, and that is only possible when we follow the values of the Quran, because these help to strengthen this indivisibility built within us through this ruh of Allah. Hence, the human self is not a part of the divine self. This is a trait or energy bestowed from Allah with which man has been blessed. And once we follow this, we will see that with the passage of time, how much conviction becomes built up within us. The small things which we might be ignoring when we were not guided by the Quran, once we are guided by the Quran, those small things in our life, small actions, small thoughts, become the building block of our future moment self. The next slide is the human self and its manifestation. According to a dictionary of lexicon, there are numerous meanings of this root, that is of nafs, loftiness and superiority, courage, eminence, intent and punishment. In addition, the meanings of intellect, knowledge, heart, consciousness and awareness all are in this root. But overall, this term encompasses all aspects of the human self or personality. According to these meanings, among us, the word self or ego is used for this. Furthermore, the meaning of the word nafsun also includes that of a brotherly relationship, and this word is also used in the meaning for which among us we say my own self. This is interesting, brotherly relationship, and that is why Quran says Allafa baina qulubikum, that Allah united your hearts. So there is that potential left or exists within ourselves to develop this extra relationship which is far beyond the biological relationships we have. Additionally, the word nafasun means breath, whose plural is anfasun. In the context of the present discussion, we will confine ourselves to the domain in which this word is used for the human self. As has already been noted, the distinguishing trait between animals and man is the human self. From this, it is evident that the human self is bestowed on every human child without any discrimination, and this is that very distinction on the basis of which it is stated, "Verily, we have made all children of Adam worthy of respect." What is the human self? In other words, what is its form and nature? This can neither be described nor can it be made to be comprehended, because it is non-physical, but we know it exists. Why we know it exists? Because I exist. This is because it is not some material entity. Leaving aside the human self, we cannot even explain life, which we commonly call soul, what this is. From signs of life, we can differentiate between the living and the dead, but no one can explain what life itself actually is. This is the same situation with regard to the human self. In fact, even more subtle than this. We can say nothing about its constitution either. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. More on the human self. It can be recognized on the basis of those traits which are manifested through it in a practical form. The human self is given to every human being in the form of a potential, i.e., in an undeveloped form. And this is a very interesting statement of fact that we have certain potentials, and if we have a desire to know these potentials after coming to the Quran, then we will need to follow the path of the Quran. And without following it, we simply cannot become aware of these potentials, because these potentials are related to the divine attributes, and these come out within the permanent values. The Quran informs us that the ability to strengthen itself following development has also been kept within it. And if it is not developed, then it remains undeveloped and suppressed. And this undeveloped and suppressed form is that these human beings do not carry out those duties, those actions in their life which are noted in the Quran. So it is not otherworldly. So if somebody wants to evaluate other human beings and assess others, they should first develop those traits within themselves so that they can relate it to others. In Surah Al-Shams, it is stated, the human self and the way this has been made balanced reflect on it. The potential for this aspect has been kept within it, that if it wishes, it can create degeneration within itself by treading on the wrong path. See, it is a choice. And if it wishes, it can become ever stronger by remaining protected from this degeneration. So it depends on its desire. And obviously, if we do not know about the Quran, then somebody should tell us about it. So that is where our responsibility as students of the Quran increases. And this responsibility actually helps us to strengthen our own self. Because if I'm convinced about the correctness or the truth of some path, and if I pass it on to others and share with others, this will give me the courage, it will give me the strength to share our experiences with others. Whoever developed itself has succeeded and prospered. And this success and prosperity is visible in the form of human self-development. His meadows bore fruition. But whoever kept it suppressed under the burden of his base emotions and did not allow it to blossom, his fields of life became barren, his human potentials remained dormant. And this is where we should pause and reflect that those people who do not come to the Quran and fail to acquire the benefits of following the path of the Quran, they have essentially wasted this life. They did go through all the challenges and difficulties of this life presented by the man-made system, but all those latent potentials which were kept in them, which are given in the Quran, they failed to bring them out. As a result, they never acquired that self which becomes eligible for the life of the hereafter. And this is something we need to reflect, that is, pause and reflect again and again till we fully grasp it. For the manner of development of the human self, the Quran has used the term tazkiyah, the dictionary meaning of which is growth. And tazkiyah has same root as that of zakat. The duty of human life is that this self should be developed. From this, it will become capable of advancing forward by traversing further evolutionary stages of life. This is termed as the life of Jannat or paradise, in the life of the hereafter. If it remains undeveloped, then it cannot progress further. It remains static, that this is termed as the life of Jahannam or hell. And this is something which is sometimes very difficult to grasp when we see the majority around us in the world of 2025 do not even know about the Quran, and those even who know about the Quran are not willing to come to the Quran the way Quran has asked them to follow this path. That how does it remain Jahannam or stagnant or suffers from inertia? And for that we have to acquire that moment self, and acquiring that moment self and strengthening it, and the kinds of outlook we acquire through our deeds will become an evidence on us that why others are stagnant. The word Jahim, whose meaning is that of an obstacle, has also appeared for Jahannam. So Jahim is the one which people create for themselves. Nobody else creates it for them, they create it themselves. The next slide is, let us sort out human self-development. Development of the human self takes place by obedience to those values which have been revealed through Wahi. Being able to act on these values is possible by living within that system which is called a Deen or Al-Islam. So if the system is not established, then those selves which want to follow this path, they have to come together and make an effort for that. One of the responsibilities of Rasulullah described in the Quran is Yuzakkikum. He develops yourself. The meaning of this is that through the teaching of the book and its hikmat, the messenger shapes such a system in which the selves of the mu'mineen continue to develop by following the divine values. Here we should pause and reflect that why should messenger do it? That means the messenger himself has convinced himself through his own Eimaan and Salih deeds that this is the book for him. And as a consequence of that Eimaan, now he wishes others to benefit from it. So these things we should keep in mind and do not make it impersonal. This is for the messenger and our case is different. Not at all. We are also human beings and we can do what the messengers did in the past. And no more messengers are coming. The Quran is finalized, preserved for all times. The practice that we see among us of meditation and devotion in the seclusion of monasteries for the purification of the soul, which is termed as tazkiyah nafs, is nothing more than self-deception. The whole of this religious rituals and others is total self-deception when we verify it, evaluate it in the light of the Quran. And the kind of a word these people have created, that becomes an evidence of their being on the wrong path. According to the Quran, the development of the self takes place through persistent striving within the Quranic system. There are different and numerous aspects to acting on these values. Every aspect of human life is the objective of these, but the most prominent status among these is accorded to spending in the path of Allah, that is anfaq fi sabilillah, without the expectation of any reward or return. And we should keep in mind this should be voluntary, because if we voluntarily commit to this path and are willing to shed some part of our possessions for this path, has a far higher value than when we are asked to do it. So these are totally different. Two aspects are totally different. One is with the conviction of our heart, and the second is on the conviction of the heart of someone else who is asking for to extend your help towards this system. The practical meaning of this is that man should strive to the utmost according to his power and capacity, and from the outcome of this work, he should retain what he requires for his own needs and hand the remainder over to this system for the welfare of the whole of mankind. So at this stage, since we are going through this process of coming together and trying to figure it out, that how to proceed further by learning about the Quran, our job is that whatever we can contribute towards this cause, we must do it if we are sincere, come companion of Allah. If not, then that is fine. But it is our choice. And this is something which needs pause and reflect on a continuous basis till we are fully convinced about our path in life. He who gives his wealth and possessions so that his self may develop. Next slide is a few more comments on the aspect of being human. In Surah Al-Baqarah, it is stated that by keeping the means of sustenance freely available in the path of Allah, strengthening of the self, and Quran uses the word tasbeet and nafs, is achieved. The meaning of tasbeet is strengthening of the self. The opposite of anfaq is miserliness or selfishness, i.e. hoarding everything for one's own self. The Quran has given a strict injunction to avoid this. In a divine system, this form of anfaq requires an organizational structure. We should keep in mind that Allah is not going to directly now ask us to strive on His path. He has whatever He wanted to tell human beings, mankind, He has told us through His book. Being the word of Allah, if we follow it, then the results will appear before us initially in strengthening ourselves and then by coming together and proceeding forward together on this path. At this point, the question naturally arises that what is the sign which indicates that the human self is developing? It is easy to recognize this by using the Quran. The whole Quran lays down the traits of both kufr as well as of mu'min. The self of Allah is the most complete being, and those attributes belonging to it which are described in the Quran are different facets of this self. Some of these attributes are those which relate to the infinitude of the divine self, for example, being the first and the last. Though no one else can be a part of these, other attributes are such whose manifestation is also possible within the human self, within human limits. But we have to also understand what it means to be Awwal and Akhir in the case of Allah Himself, because that is how we develop that strength of character within us, that we are the companion of someone who will always be there. Whichever individual displays these attributes, it will be said about him that his self is being developed. It is this which can be called nearness to Allah. It is on this basis that it is stated in the Quran. Do not begin to make judgments yourself according to your own standard that yourself is being developed. So Quran has taken it out of our hands. Otherwise, every human being can justify his own wrongs and rights. Allah knows very well, that is through the Quran, we can figure it out what Allah knows, whose self is protected to what extent from disintegration. Going to the next slide, ignoring self-development is an eternal loss, and this is something we should pause and reflect in the light of today's presentation. In Surah Al-Hashr, there is a very important verse in which it is enjoined, "Lo, do not be like those people who forgot Allah, the consequence of which was that their own self disappeared from their sight." Because the higher purpose of life disappeared, because it is our self through which we connect with Allah, through which we know that why are we created and what do we have to do with our own self-development. And if there is no higher model in front of us, then we are at the mercy of circumstances around us, and we can see millions of gods which exist in man-made systems. Its clear meaning is that forgetting Allah and forgetting one's own self are intrinsically linked. From these facts, it is clear that the divine attributes are that standard through which it can be measured and evaluated to what extent the human self has developed or is developing. Because once we relate to Allah, then we know that whatever we have got, whatever we are bestowed with is from Allah. We got free mind, we got free body, we got this word free as well. Presently, this word is handed over to human intellect and unbridled desires because of the non-existence of Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen. So every student of the Quran should aim to become a Mu'min, then come together as a consequence of becoming a Mu'min. If the desire to come together hasn't arisen in anyone's mind and heart, that means he is not a Mu'min of the Quran. It is that simple. The fundamental characteristic of the self is individuality. Individuality means that each self is self-sufficient, established in its own right. It is not in need of some other support. And this is what happens in a self which has acquired the conviction of the Quran. It is responsible itself for every one of its decisions and is also has to bear the consequences of these itself. That is totally becoming responsible for own acts and thoughts. So these are very important aspects which are noted in this slide. No one else is a partner in this, nor can be. In Surah Al-Ikhlas, where it is stated about Allah, this is the common translation, say He is Allah, the one and only, and the word used is Ahad, Qul huwallahu Ahad. The meaning of Ahad is not one, rather it is the manifestation of the individuality or uniqueness of the divine self. The fundamental characteristic of the human self is that it is the possessor of choice and intent. Everything in the universe has been created constrained to obey the divine laws. This is why it is proclaimed that the will of Allah, that is His Mashiach, is operating fully in all its glory in the universe. But what about man? But about man, Allah has declared, do whatever you like according to your own wish. So this planet is presented to man to exercise our choices. And we can see what kind of a choices man is displaying at this time in the world of 2025. It is this choice and intent which the whole Quran is full of. Next is making accountability of human self absolutely clear. Say to them that Al-Haq has arrived from your Rabb. Whoever among you wishes can accept and adopt it. Whoever wishes can reject it. So choice is ours. Even after becoming students of the Quran, even after sharing all these presentations, we still can make our choice. And we should search our heart and say, am I committed to this part 100%, or there is some iota of doubt lurking somewhere? And why that doubt is lurking, we have to address it. Whoever adopts the right path, its benefit will reach him, and whoever treads on the wrong path, its harm will also be to his own self. It is this choice and intent of man whose natural outcome is that every individual is responsible for his own deeds. No one else is a participant in this. Hence, the next part of the verse is, no bearer of burdens can carry the burden of another. And this is the truth right at the fundamental level. I'm responsible for the burdens which I carry, and my burdens are directly related to my thoughts and my deeds in this life. Its exposition is given in these words. Whatever good deed the human self does, its benefit will also be to him, and whatever wrong deed it does, its loss will also be borne by it. One should not be scared. This is the way system functions. For example, in the human system, in whichever country we are, we know the local laws, and that is the way we have to behave and get benefit out of those laws. The reality is that according to the law of requital of Allah, the effect of every deed of man is imprinted on his self, or we could say that every act of his leaves behind an impact on his self. Whoever goes against the divine values, its outcome is that weakness is created in his self. Whatever righteous deeds you do for the good of yourself, you will obtain a result of khair, that is good from Allah, and this is a very great reward, and this reward is visible. So we will look into it in next slide. Human self-development needs to do khair. Although the general meaning of the word khair is a righteous deed, fundamentally it means such deeds due to which expenses become created in the authority of the human self. The root of khair and ikhtiyar, that is freedom to choose, is the same. This is why the mu'mineen are exhorted to, you should exceed on those deeds which become the cause for increase in the powers and authority of yourself. So this is something, if we have adopted, we have aimed for the aim of the Quran, that is the aim put forward before us by Allah in the Quran, then we should listen to these verses and read these verses very carefully and pause and reflect again and again till we get the gist of it. The supreme attribute of mu'mineen themselves is declared to be those who are foremost in deeds of khair. See, the foremost, for becoming foremost, we have to have a desire, we have to have a need, we should have understood the purpose of the Quran, and we should have become the companion of Allah 100%. As Quran says, Allah waliyul lazina amanu yukhrijuhum minal zulumati ilan nur. We want to come out of the darknesses created by the man-made systems. In other words, those who swiftly advance ahead in those deeds which increase their powers. So with this following of the Quran, we acquire power within our own self. The things which were not visible to us previously become visible. In another words, the result of their deeds is stated to be, for them are wide expanses of authority. The divine commands themselves are termed as deeds of khair. It is noted in a number of verses of the Quran that, remember, obedience to these laws and commands is not enjoined because there is some benefit to Allah from it. It is the way Allah has created this system. He has created this system so that we create our own self. That is the purpose of our creation. And in order to create that self which meets the criterion laid down by the Quran, we have to come to terms with our own existence, with our own I, with our own nafs. The aim from this is that expanses keep arising in yourself. So this is an opportunity for us to expand our vision, expand the horizon of our consciousness. Life is about enhancing our value as human beings. So that means we should know our value before coming to the Quran and what value we are acquiring. How are we enhancing our own value in the light of the Quran on a tangible basis, not otherworldly basis that the results will come before us in the life of the hereafter, as is put forward under the domain of religions. One of its meanings is also that the real purpose of the limits which are imposed on man through the medium of wahi is actually so that expansiveness can become created in himself, just as waterfalls are constructed at various places in a canal so that the velocity of the water becomes increased due to these. On this basis, those who wish to excel in the paradisiacal life are called mutanafisun. By tanafis is meant the effort and endeavor to exceed one another in acquiring expansiveness of the self. And that is why Quran says exceed each other in the matter, in the deeds of bir, which gives you elevation. That is, we should try to become as righteous as possibly within the means available to us. From these explanations of the Quran, we reach this conclusion that righteous deeds, balanced deeds, or virtuous deeds are those actions through which expansiveness or strength is created in the human self. See how the emphasis is changing from others onto our own self. So the Quran says when you help others, you are actually increasing your own value. You are recognizing what is going on in the world around you. So your consciousness, your awareness has become multiplied. Some of the darknesses of the man-made system you couldn't see, and now you are able to see those darknesses. And wrong or evil deeds are those actions due to which weaknesses or debilities is created in it, i.e. disintegration occurs in the human self as a result of these. In fact, intishar, that is disintegration, is what is termed as shar or evil. This is also called khusran nafs, loss pertaining to the human self, and how big loss that is, that the human self which is going to survive after our physical death, and we fail to bring it up to a very high level of its own value which is kept within it, i.e. those deeds due to which a deficiency occurs in the human self. According to the Quran, a deed does not mean only those actions which are visibly carried out by someone. Those matters which a human being makes the intention or decision to enact are also included in it, even if they are not carried out by him practically. So this is very important, and next slide is about it. Becoming aware of our own thoughts is part of self-development. It is on this basis that it is declared we are aware of even the passing thoughts of the human heart. And if one has not become the companion of Allah, one may be scared of this. But if one has become the companion of Allah after acquiring Eimaan, how heartening, how encouraging, how super is this statement that Allah is aware of my thoughts. I want Him to be aware of my thoughts, because now these are on the path of Deen. Next is, in another place it is stated, Allah is aware of the tricks of the eyes and all that the hearts conceal. What this means is that the intention and decision of man also leaves an effect on the human self. Taking these effects and imprints of human deeds with it, the human self moves forward after death. This is what is called the scroll of deeds of man. If the weight of the deeds which develop the human self is greater, then it will advance forward in the evolutionary stage. If their weight is less and the human self has not been able to be duly developed, then it will be prevented from advancing forward. This is why it is stated about Jannat and Jannat is the recompense for those deeds of man from which the development of his self has taken place. And we can test it ourselves as well, that whatever we do in life, there is always a thought before it. And what kind of a thought we have, that will decide what kind of a decision we have made. Even impulsively, when we are annoyed with something and we react impulsively, we will see that there is a thought of some kind of anger in our mind before we act. So Quran is asking us to become aware of our thoughts, because if we become aware of our thoughts and bring these thoughts within the confines of the permanent values of the Quran, and become companion of Allah and commit to this path and strive on this path with whatever we have, then essentially our self will start developing. The last slide of today's presentation, finally, we need to pause and reflect till we become convinced. There is a verse in Surah Al-An'am, the more deeply man's gaze ponders on it, the more elated he becomes. The meaning of this great verse is that each one of those things which you call mine in this life, all those relations whom you call mine, leaving them all behind here. That is all physical side is we are going to leave behind. You will come to us bringing only yourself. Your wealth and possessions, your near and dear ones, your friends and associates, your body, all these will be left behind and you will appear in our court bringing only your own self. The word farada, which is used in this verse, refers to the individuality of the human self. We should look at this verse and the verse before and after this as well. And it's good to go through this verse a few times and to understand that what Quran is telling us is about our individuality at our self's level. This is why the Quran has enjoined, protect yourself. If you keep treading on my path, then no one can cause harm to reach you. Again, we should look at this verse because it's only quoted partially over here. This verse also refers to a supreme reality. In the world, other people can cause both harm and benefit to reach man. But this harm and benefit is limited to his physical life. As far as his self is concerned, no other individual can cause harm to reach it nor benefit. Because it is the way we are given this self, no human being can know our individual thoughts, for example. We can think of anything at any moment, and others will never ever know about it. And this is a big conundrum in the field of psychology and philosophy, that how our nervous system produces thoughts. Because thoughts are invisible, whereas we can see the nervous system, and the nervous system also ages, whereas our thoughts do not age. And then thinking about thinking is a step forward. And this all is because of the divine energy. And to understand that aspect right at the level of birth, only Quran can help. Man himself causes benefit to reach it, and he himself causes harm to it. No one else can become a partner in this. At this point, that quote of the German philosopher Nietzsche comes to mind, in which he had said, and if a friend does you wrong, then say, I forgive you what you have done to me. That you have done it to yourself, however, how could I forgive that? And see, these philosophers, they also understood this point by observing in the man-made world. And because they were not fully convinced about it, and those reading them are also not convinced about it, and the conviction can only come from the Quran, hence they never follow it. It is only the Quranic students who have decided to become Mu'mineen understand the implication of this, because they link it with the life of the hereafter. And if we have not come to terms with our own thinking and our own Eimaan, then we haven't benefited from the Quran. And with that, I come to the end. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.